All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to today's webinar. This webinar is brought to you by the University of Illinois Extension and Rural Partners, which is Illinois' Rural Development Council. My name is Laura Hep-Kessel. I am the Director of Telehealth Services for the SIU School of Medicine, and I also serve as the Chair of the Board of Directors for Rural Partners. There are a few housekeeping details I would like to share before we get started. Because we have so many on the line, if you would, please mute your mic and stop your video to help with bandwidth issues. If you have questions or comments, please use the chat space. I will be monitoring those and present those questions to our presenter at the end of her presentation. If you're having audio difficulty, post those questions in the chat space and Nancy or someone will provide technical assistance. The webinar is being recorded and will be available later on the local government education website. You will get an email when the recording is ready if you had pre-registered for today's webinar. So welcome again. Thank you for being here. Rural Partners, as we mentioned, is the state's Rural Development Council, and we are thankful for this partnership with Extension to offer this webinar series. Rural Partners is a volunteer working board. We're membership driven. If you're interested in more information about our organization, I will include our website in the chat space after we get started. So I'd like to present our speaker. Dr. Wendy Bartlow is going to talk about creating age-friendly communities. Dr. Bartlow currently works as the Assistant Director for the Center on Health, Aging, and Disability at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where she helped to start the Age-Friendly Champaign-Urbana initiative. Wendy completed her doctorate in anthropology and a pre-doctoral fellowship in gerontology at Wayne State University in Detroit, where she spent 2 years researching the lives of older adults in Detroit neighborhoods. So we are very thankful that Wendy has agreed to spend some time with us today, and we are going to go ahead and get started. So Dr. Bartlow, I will be monitoring the chat space, and I'll just turn it over to you for now.
All right, thank you, Laura, and thank you for having me here today. I'm always happy to work with Extension because Extension has been a great partner to Age Friendly. We've worked with each other on a lot of stuff, and I'm excited to learn more about Rural Partners as well. Okay. Oh, sorry. There we go. All right. So this is just a little roadmap for what I'm going to talk about today. A little bit about me. Like Laura said, I'm based at the Center on Health, Aging, and Disability at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. We are a center within the College of Applied Health Sciences. So we do a lot of different things, but mostly all in service of research on health, aging, and disability, research and education on health, aging, and disability. So we serve as the research and outreach arm of the College of Applied Health Sciences. And Age Friendly has been our sort of main outreach initiative over the past 5 years since I came on board. So today I'm going to kind of give an overview about age-friendly communities, give some specific examples of what we've done, and where we're going, because since we started this initiative 5 years ago, I think you all know that things have changed quite a bit with COVID. So we're kind of trying to envision ourselves for what I'm calling Age-Friendly 2.0, and do the needs look different of our community coming out of this pandemic? And then I'd like to just talk a little bit about some issues of livability in rural communities, and also some guiding questions for you if you're thinking about starting your own effort. So whenever I talk about age-friendly or older adults, I like to first take a step back and talk a little bit more about what it means to be an older adult, ageism, and misperceptions about older people and what it means to be an older person. Because ageism is really at the root of a lot of the issues that are faced by older people, and a lot of societies face as well. So there are a lot of misperceptions about what it means to be an older person. Older people are often stereotyped as angry, forgetful, a lot of times they're also stereotyped as either wealthy or cute or warm. And I give similar talks a lot of times to college age students who are, are in their early 20s. And a lot of them initially fail to see the problem with stereotyping someone as cute or rich. And through a lot of conversation, we kind of come to see that there are a lot of issues. A lot of times stereotyping an older person as cute can really infantilize them and put them in a position of being, thought of not as a fully fledged adult, but more like a child or someone to be taken care of, as opposed to an independent adult, which is why I'm always very careful to use the phrase older adults as opposed to elderly or seniors, just to reinforce that older people are still independent adults. The other thing about stereotyping older people as wealthy is that we know that a lot of older people aren't wealthy, and that a lot of older people live in poverty, and this type of stereotype can really affect sound policy development and allocation of resources for lower income older people that are in need of these types of resources. So if you look up here in the corner, the left corner, a lot of times older people are stereotyped as angry, and a lot of research now, into personality and aging suggests that a grumpy older person was likely a grumpy younger person. This is more a function of personality and not necessarily aging. Now I want you to take a look at this middle image of it's a political cartoon titled Silver Tsunami Hazard. And I really this type of imagery I find very troublesome and very offensive, because to position an entire group of older people as a tsunami or some kind of disaster that is impending our society, when it pits older people against younger people, when a lot of times we know what's good for older people is also good for younger people, especially in terms of cities and design. By making something more accessible for an older person, you're not making it any less accessible for a younger person. And people of all ages want the same types of things in terms of cities. They want nice public parks. They want safe streets. They want to feel connected and happy and safe in their communities. So I find this type of imagery really troubling, also because it ignores the value that older people provide to their communities. And then again, going back to positive stereotypes about older people, oftentimes when you hear there's a positive story about older people in the media, it's often the exception rather than the rule. Older couple runs marathon. What's your excuse? Well, I'm not an older person yet, but I couldn't run a marathon either. A lot of this comes down to individual access and ability, and not a function of age. So these are the types of things I really like to talk about when we're starting a conversation about older people, is really to think about older people not as some kind of monolith, not as some kind of voting block, not as some kind of societal problem to be solved, but as members of our community that are diverse, that have diverse backgrounds, religions, races, ethnicities, and diverse access to resources as well. So why are we even talking about this? So we know that as a world and as a state, we are getting older. Particularly in Illinois, our older population is increasing. And you can see by 2030, I believe 1 in 4 older adults in our state will be over the age of 60. So we know that we're getting older. We know that there are going to be more older people in our state. So critical to the health and well-being of older people, and this is actually true for people across the lifespan, is social connectedness. It's pretty much the most important factor in aging well. So there's some research that indicates that isolation and perceived loneliness in old age can have similar negative health effects to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And I want to point this out specifically, the connection between aging well and social connectedness, because living in a rural or geographically isolated environment is also one of the risk factors for social isolation. And let me just be clear, it's a risk factor. It's not to say that every older adult aging in a rural space feels disconnected, isolated, but it is a risk factor. Particularly if you think about things infrastructure-wise, because some of the things that can affect social isolation are also access to transportation, access to public transportation, and the access to things like internet, which are infrastructure issues. I think that, over the past couple of decades, we've heard a lot about the digital divide and who has access to internet and who does not. So, for a long time, when the digital divide was considered with respect to age, people just sort of assumed that older people would be resistant to getting online or not have the ability to learn new technologies, which we know is not true. But really a bigger predictor of digital divide is urban versus rural. And a lot of that does have to do with access. Also, one thing that we do have to remember with older people and access to technology is that not only are the older people of today often adept with technology and able to learn it as well, but the older people of tomorrow are already engaged in with technology as well. So when we think about livable cities, we have to plan for not just the older person of today, but the older person of tomorrow as well. And things like internet infrastructure are very important. But so I wanted to specifically talk about this because living in a rural or geographically isolated environment is one risk factor for social isolation, but it's also important to remember that older adults are often facing many of these risk factors. Someone who is geographically isolated might also live alone, might also be poor, might also not have internet. So you're thinking about multiple risk factors. Some of them are individual, some of them could be addressed at a societal level. Some of them are infrastructure issues. So this is just to say that there's a lot that affects the lives of older adults, both in urban and rural settings, and those in between, like Champaign-Urbana, where I'm based. So thinking about all this, I'm going to turn now and talk a little bit more about age-friendly. So thinking about all these upcoming demographic shifts, and notice I say demographic shifts and not silver tsunami or imply that this is a negative change. We just know that the world is changing. So how can we support the people that exist in the world? The World Health Organization really started to think about all this in 2006. And they said, well, what can we do globally to prepare for these upcoming demographic shifts? How can some changes be carried out at a local level to support an aging population? And that is really where the initial idea for the age-friendly world came from. Now we know this has been going on for 15 years. They started this program. It's in 20 countries, 1,000 communities worldwide have decided that they want to become age-friendly communities. Now, in the United States, the World Health Organization has partnered with the AARP to become an age friendly, or the AARP is the service agent of age friendly in the United States. AARP has gone through a little bit of rebranding. They're no longer the American Association of Retired Persons. They are just the AARP. And that has to do somewhat with the shifts on, they still see themselves as an advocate for older adults, but they really want to focus on livability of communities across the lifespan. So in the United States, the AARP really provides the infrastructure for age friendly, the infrastructure and the support. And the AARP identified 8 domains of age friendliness, things that not only do they think are important for making an age-friendly community, but that older people have identified as critical to aging well. And I've got them up here: housing, transportation, outdoor building and spaces, social participation, communication and information, respect and social inclusion. This really respect and social inclusion really refers to things mostly about safety, and how safe older people feel in their communities, physical safety, but also safety in speaking their mind and expressing their views, community and health services, and civic participation in employment. This is, how many older adults vote, what kinds of paid and unpaid employment is available to them. For older adults who still want to remain in the workforce, are there quality opportunities for them? Do older people serve on boards and at city councils, local governments as well? So these types of things, these are all things that not just the AARP identified and the World Health Organization identified, but older people have identified as being important as well. So thinking about this, I think I've used the term livable community as well several times already. So I wanted to go ahead and define it. So AARP is really focused on livable communities for people of all ages, one that's safe and secure. It's a community where people can thrive in ways that they choose to thrive. And that they feel comfortable doing so. And particularly with regard to aging, allowing people to age in a way that they want to age, where they want to age. This might be, do they want to age in their own homes? Do they want to stay in their community? Can they afford to stay in their community? Are their homes fit to age in? Do they have access to the types of in-home care they need? Are there opportunities for older adults to engage in the civic and social participation, the things I talked about earlier, running for city council or making sure that their voices are heard? So this is really, although the focus of Age Friendly is on older adults, Age Friendly really should be a community that is livable for everyone. And I think I mentioned earlier that, if you make it more accessible for older adults, you're not making it any less accessible for anyone else. I think we use a lot of times the example of a traffic light. Well, if there isn't enough time for an older person to get across the street before the light changes, and that is subsequently changed, that doesn't hurt anyone else, but 2, that helps a lot of younger people as well. That might help a younger person with mobility issues that has trouble getting across the street before the light changes. Or that might help a parent with a stroller or a parent walking a toddler. So all these types of things. There's also a movement, it's called the 8 to 80 design. So if you design something for someone who is 8 years old and someone who is 80 years old, you'll capture everyone in between as well. Also, if you think about things like that really do help older people remain active and participate in the social world, the social life of their community. Something like access to bathrooms is very important. But that doesn't just help older people, that helps people of all ages. You know, all of us need to use a bathroom, and it helps, you know, parents with children. It helps all kinds of everyone. Something like that that is designed to help older people can help everyone. So in Illinois, I believe there are 11 age-friendly communities that have joined this network of age-friendly communities. And you can see that they're all of varying sizes, although they all kind of skew kind of small to mid-sized, I would say. We really run our effort, Champaign-Urbana. We're listed here as 2 cities, but we are one effort. And this is something that I would really recommend for communities who are smaller to join forces, and maybe you become an age-friendly county. For us, it would not make sense to have 2 separate efforts, since we are twin cities, and we are really able to work together on this initiative. But you can see that it's a lot of different areas through the state. It's and a lot of different sizes. And this is true nationally of age-friendly communities as well. I think, you know, and it looks a little bit different in every community, which is nice because the framework is flexible. Something like age-friendly Los Angeles might have a large staff housed in the mayor's office. Something like age-friendly Champaign-Urbana is, you know, we are smaller. We do have some support from the Center on Health, Aging, and Disability, but we're mostly a volunteer organization. So it's really globally it looks different. It's really what meets your local needs, but also what resources do you have available too. So a lot of times I get this question, you know, is age friendly? Is it a designation? And no, it is not a designation. It's not, the AARP is very careful about this. It's not a designation saying, you know, your city's age friendly. It's a great place to retire, move to Champaign-Urbana if you want an age friendly city. It's not a designation. It's more of a process. And I'll talk about the process a little bit in a moment. So it's about a group of people or a city coming together and saying, yes, we want to make our community more livable for people of all ages with a focus on older adults. And here are the steps that we are going to take to do that. And not, hooray, this is a great city for older people. I mean, and it very well might be, but they don't want you just to stop at that. It's about continuous evaluation and continuous improvement. Another question I hear a lot is this funded by the AARP? If you join the network, will the AARP give your cities money? No, it's unfortunately not funded by the AARP, and most of these across the country are mostly either volunteer-led efforts or housed at the municipal level. But there is the opportunity to apply for grants from the AARP if you are part of the member network for specific projects. And if you go to the AARP website, you can see the types of projects that they fund. And they're from large to small. I mean, it could be something very, you know, they've done some really interesting things about, you know, pop-up gardens in public spaces, but also something like, hey, we need more benches for older people to sit on in our downtown. That type of thing. So it's really a wide range of projects. You can also, so the AARP does give those grants, but also I think it's just interesting to peruse the website and their newsletters, just because they've got a lot of project examples of varying scales that could be implemented in their community. And they're very big on sharing the results of different age-friendly efforts and promoting them, because they don't want anybody out there reinventing the wheel per se. You know, they highly encourage you to kind of look at, see what other exciting things that other cities are doing. So this is really kind of the process of becoming an age-friendly city and joining the network of age-friendly communities. So, and committing to this process. So really the first thing to do is kind of, you know, bring together a group of people who want to talk about these issues and who are invested in the well-being of older adults and making the city a more livable place for people of all ages, and starting the conversation about, you know, who should be at the table and what kinds of things do we need to address. I want to point out here that it's very important early on to include older adults in this process. You know, we at the center here like to think about, you know, research with older adults, not for older adults, to make sure that their critical voices are included. After you've kind of brought everyone to the table, the AARP asks that you conduct some kind of community needs assessment. So the AARP, they have a lot of tools. They also now, if you join the network, they will go ahead and do a survey for you. You know, we did our survey, I think almost 4 or 5 years ago. We surveyed 500 older adults in our community. And, you know, we were fortunate that we had the resources of the university. So, you know, we have a statistician on staff who could just help us figure this all out. But now the AARP will help you do this survey that's a needs assessment of your community to assess the different domains of age friendliness. From that survey, they'd look for you to develop an action and evaluation plan based on the survey results. And I'll talk a little bit about what we saw and kind of where we decided as a group to go with our action plan, and then also how our plans are starting to pivot in the wake of the pandemic. And really from there, it's kind of implementing and working towards the goals of the plan, but also, you know, not dropping that communication with the AARP, sharing your successes, and ultimately also what didn't work well. The AARP is also really interested in hearing about that because they want to know, they're really interested in sharing best practices. They don't want anyone out there reinventing the wheel, duplicating efforts. And then, you know, when you're done with one action plan, or then it all starts over. We're kind of going back to, you know, what worked well, what didn't work well, and where can we go from here? So we've been really fortunate to have a lot of really great partners. And I put this up here, these are just some of the people that we've worked with along the way. We've really worked with a lot of different local organizations. So if you're interested in starting an effort like this, I'd really kind of encourage you just to think about, you know, who is in your community, and think more broadly, not just about, you know, we've had great partners from the aging services world, places that serve older adults directly, but we also, you know, who else is here in your community that might have a vested interest in this, that they're not, their only clients aren't older adults. For us, for example, that was the Champaign and Urbana Parks District, who have been great partners for us. You know, older adults are just one small piece of their pie, but a very critical part of their audience, and they're very interested in these types of issues. Same with Regional Planning Commission, you know, they're interested in residents of all ages. Transportation District serve residents of all ages. Places like United Way, Housing Authority, local foundations, our hospital systems serve people of all ages, but all these organizations have a vested interest in making the community more livable and a nice place to live. So I mentioned the survey. The AARP has a lot of resources for communities that are interested in these in becoming age friendly. They have a lot of newsletters, they have workbooks, you can see this tool that right here, it's called the Livability score. You can go on and you can put in your zip code, and they kind of pulled together a lot of different sources to help you determine how livable your community is. A lot of people see this 57 and worry that it's, is that an F? No, that's actually it's actually a pretty good score. So I encourage you kind of just to go on the AARP website and look at their livability index and see how they've rated their community, but also take it with a grain of salt. I mean, for example, communities that get very high scores, I think places like San Francisco, they've got a lot of great stuff. They've got a lot of opportunities. They've got a lot of opportunities for engagement. They've got great public transportation. What they don't have there, I would say, is affordable housing for older adults, and that is a big challenge. So I would say don't let this be the end all be all, but use it kind of as a starting point. So they have all kinds of online guides. They have an online library. They have newsletters. They will do the survey for you. The Livable community staff, I found them wonderful to work with. A lot of times I have called them on the phone and they're always willing to have a meeting with me or a conference call, just if I want to bounce ideas off of them, or if I want to say, do you know other communities that are doing anything in this area? Who could I talk to? At the beginning, because our effort is, although it's a community effort, it's housed logistically at a university. I asked, could you connect me with other university staff that are working in this area? And they set me up with several conversations, and it was really helpful. They have a new membership portal, which is kind of like a social networking for member cities, and people go on there and leave messages, and you could go on and say, are there other communities working in the rural space, and meet people to chat with. And the other thing that they did, and this was obviously before COVID, but they have conferences. They have Livable communities conferences, and they actually, the AARP, anyone can attend them. The AARP actually invited me and paid for me to attend. So it was great because at the time we were, they have a lot of very dynamic speakers. I was able to meet a lot of people from other age-friendly communities and a lot of AARP staff. I mean, one of the most interesting things for me was just meeting people and finding out about the different ways how age-friendly looked differently in different communities, and also how it was housed at a lot of different organizations. I met a lot of people who were, city planners, for example, but then I met a lot of people who were either from community foundations or United Ways or other nonprofits that had offered themselves up to serve as the logistical home for this type of effort. So it was, I think, a really great conference. And also the other thing that was great is at the time they have, I'd say, trainings and workshops and sessions for all stages of age friendly. Like if you're thinking about becoming age friendly, if you've been age friendly for a long time. At the time we were thinking about writing our action plan and trying to sift through some survey data. And so I attended a lot of sections on writing an action plan, and that was really helpful. So I have to tell you, we had this beautiful action plan that we came together and wrote based on our survey data. And out of our survey data, there were so many different things that we could have tackled because there were a lot of issues that were raised. But we really had to be careful as a group of mostly volunteers about what do we have the effort for, what do we have the ability to take on, and more importantly, what are we most excited about taking on first? So it really, for us, it boiled down to 3 areas. Inclusion. We wanted to really focus on fighting ageism in our community, because ageism, like I talked about at the beginning, is really at the root of a lot of the challenges that older adults face. So one of our strategies there was to partner with local organizations and media outlets to do more positive stories about older adults. And we partnered with a couple of organizations in our local paper to do a 70 over 70 event the last 2 years, where local adults over the age of 70 who are making incredible contributions to the community are honored. And the first year, I have to say, it was so fantastic because, and I think that there were a lot of naysayers who said, oh, are we even going to get 70 applications? Well, we got so many applications, far beyond the 70, because there are so many older adults that are really contributing to our community in a variety of ways. So we ended up having a brunch to honor all the winners, and there were over 500 people in attendance at the brunch, and it was a wonderful day, I have to say. So that is, fighting ageism is really that's key to this inclusion movement. And so we're looking ahead to the future about, how can we broaden this? How can we develop a set of tools and trainings for the broader community at large? I've taken on a number of student interns who have worked in this area. And over the last year, they've been developing trainings for educating their same chronologically aged peers, other people their own age, about ageism, and talking about why is ageism not just bad for older people, but how it hurts us all, and why that they, as people in their late teens and early 20s, should be thinking about these issues as well. Transportation, this is really important in our community. We know from our survey that we have a pretty good transportation system. It doesn't mean it's without issues, but we know that a lot of people in our community are driving themselves places in individual cars. So we're kind of looking at ways to do more research on, what are the barriers to older adults using things like rideshare services or the public transit system. And lastly, communication. This was an effort that we partnered, for a long time in our community. We put out, and not Age Friendly specifically, but different organizations would put out resource guides. They would be in print, and they would be pretty much out of date a lot of times by the time they hit the presses. It's a really big job to put something like that out and keep it current. So for a long time, people would say, well, why couldn't this be, on the web? Well, it can. Keeping that current is also a huge job. So it also needs an organizational home. It needs a place to live. So we knew that none of our organizations were really equipped for this. So we partnered with a local group called the Shambana Moms, who run a very popular blog and website. I don't know if there's anyone from Champaign-Urbana on the call. We have, they're kind of, I went there before I even was a mom to get news. They're kind of, in addition to our local paper, they can be newsbreakers in our community, but they were interested in starting a companion site that was a Shambana Seniors. So they run that as a for-profit site, and we just kind of have consulted with them on making connections, developing the site. It's supposed to be a mix of both resources and activities for people to do. And unfortunately, I think we all know there haven't been a lot of activities the past year, but really thinking about it in mind of not just saying, here's a concert in the park that you can go to, but here's a concert in the park you can go to. Here's the accessibility of bathrooms. This is what the parking situation is. This is how far you will have to walk to get to this concert. And so we worked with them, I think, initially on some language. Also, they have a social media presence, and I think it was an adjustment because they were used to more jokes about mom humor, and some of us felt that it didn't translate as well, and that some of the initial humor they were using wasn't funny and really a little ageist, and they were open and very receptive to that. So that type of thing. And then I have to be honest with you, you know, we had a great first year of our age-friendly action plan. We got a lot accomplished. If you want to read more about it, you can go to our website and see how we laid it out, and it's all in detail. And then right as we were going into year 2, COVID hit, and we agreed as a group to take a small hiatus because most of our steering committee and the people that were working on these different action plans had to be so focused on the acute needs of their clients, be they older adults or people of all ages, and the health of their organizations, that we really had to take a step back from this and just figure out ways that we could support the agencies in town that were doing COVID response. And we did a lot of this through the sharing of information mostly. We have a pretty active Facebook page and different ways to push out information and remain connected with the local community. So right now, kind of what we're thinking about as we're planning to regroup this year is take a step back, look at our community again and say, you know, what looks different after COVID? Are the needs still the same that we set out in this action plan that we wrote 3 years ago? Or what does our community, has COVID revealed fractures and other things that we need to address? And really thinking about the older adults in this community and what their needs are. So thinking about this all a little more broadly in the context of rural livability. So thinking about, you know, the AARP has done a lot of research on this too, on rural livability as well. And some of the things that they have found is that, well, first of all, older adults often play critical roles in their rural communities. And that might be in a volunteer role, a mentorship role, a local government role. So it's important to not only just acknowledge the contributions of older adults in rural communities, but really see them as critical members of the community. That healthcare in rural communities is a challenge. I'm sure that some of you have experienced this firsthand, but it really requires a lot of partnerships with rural health organizations and associations and providers, and trying to figure out what the gaps are there. Transportation can be a huge issue in rural communities, and often in rural communities, it's volunteers that have stepped in to fill the gaps, either in an organized manner or kind of in an ad hoc manner. And this is true in Champaign-Urbana too, that volunteers through a lot of our social service organizations have stepped in to fill this need. The other challenges related to transportation are funding and communication. It's not necessarily that different transportation options aren't available. It's that people are unaware of them, and that the communication is a challenge. So walkability in rural communities, this is something that older residents have designated as important to them. We often think about this as an urban issue, and that, you know, walkability is for cities, but it's important in rural communities too, as well. Housing challenges, and this is a big challenge in rural communities. It's one, affordability is critical, but also design and accessibility are critically important, especially where you might not have as many different types of structures, housing structures. Say an older person, you know, lives in an older 2-story house. There's not necessarily a downtown condo for them to downsize to that's all on one level, and even if there were, would that be an affordable option? Internet infrastructure, I talked a little bit about this earlier. it's a big issue. Sometimes it's not that older people are unwilling to learn it, but sometimes it's not available, or it is an issue of paying for it as well. And I talked about how, we are age-friendly Champaign-Urbana. We are two communities that have joined together. We know that we are stronger together and we should be working in communication. So in rural communities, a lot of times age-friendly or community improvement plans can be more successful when they're done with neighboring communities in mind, rather than piecemeal town by town. And also, one thing that is critically important to older rural residents is for communities to position themselves as places of opportunity, and that older people are a critical part of this opportunity, because for a society or a city or a community to be a good place to live, it needs to have people of all ages, because they all play different roles in contributing to their community. So if a society needs all people of all ages, it really needs to be a good place for all people of all ages to live. So, and lastly, if you're interested in one of these efforts, also I should just say I'm always happy to, if somebody wants to have a conversation offline about some of the things they're seeing in their community, or they're thinking about doing this, but they're not sure, you can always email me and I'm happy to chat. But some of the things to think about if you're looking to move forward with one of these types of efforts. Most importantly, how will your effort incorporate the experiences and voices of older adults? It's critical. Nothing for us without us is a lot of times what older adults say, is that they want to be involved in this. I think too, what we learned over the past 5 years that has been a challenge for us is, a diverse group of older adults as well. And I think one of the things, we thought we were forming our initial steering committee with diversity in mind, and we got our survey results back and we're all talking, and there's a lot of stuff in there that, we didn't even think about. We've been very deliberate about recruiting for race and ethnicity, and making sure we had LGBTQ representation. However, what we really did not include in our first round was any kind of economic diversity. And that really showed in our survey results that we had a lot of trouble connecting with low-income older adults and those with lower educational attainment. And our survey really showed that low-income older adults, not only did they not feel as included in our community, they didn't feel as safe on a day-to-day basis. And it came out in a lot of surprising small ways in our survey as well. They didn't think there was the same availability. Low-income older adults did not think there was the same availability of benches and public restrooms in our community. So right there, that's telling you that there's a lack of inclusion. So think about not only how will your effort incorporate the voices and experiences of older adults, but a diverse set of older adults as well. So additionally, think about what organizations should be at the table. I talked a lot about our community partners because they've been really critical to a lot of the work that we've been able to achieve. And I encourage you to think kind of broadly, not just about partners who serve only older adults or people in aging services, but that's your parks district, your libraries, your city governments, your housing authorities, your United Ways, your community foundations. What kind of organizations in your community have a vested interest in making your community a livable community? Where would your age-friendly initiative live? Who will be the point person with the AARP? In our case, that's me. But who's going to take care of? Who's going to answer questions about it? Who's going to answer emails about it? Who is going to convene the meetings? When we first started meeting, we met in a conference room every month, and now that obviously that's changed a little bit with Zoom, but who's going to send out that Zoom link? Who's going to be the logistical coordinator of it? And that's not to say that it always has to live at one place. But I think having some infrastructure and some and a place for it to call home is really critical. So, and lastly, how will you allow for people to feel ownership in the process? And it's not just that's not just older adults, although older adults should feel ownership in this process, but the people that are carrying out the action plan, and the people that serve older adults and the people at the organizations in your community, how will you engage them in a way that they feel they have ownership in the process and they feel that they are part of the age-friendly team, as opposed to being told these things need to be carried out in your community? So really, how will this be a community effort and not a top-down effort? So, and that's actually all that I have today, but I would be happy to take I don't know about all of you, but that flew by for me. I can always talk about age-friendly for a long time. I'm happy to do this too, just because we're thinking kind of critically about our next steps and how we want to emerge after COVID and how we want to regroup and what our community needs. So this was actually a good step for me to kind of think about these issues and sort of revisit where we've been. So it looks like we have just a few minutes for questions. I think.
Yeah, Dr.
Hand over to Laura to moderate.
Thank you, Dr. Bartlow. That was a great presentation, great information to share. I'll go ahead and start going through the questions. Are there resources with information regarding starting a senior center in an age-friendly community?
I imagine that there would be on the AARP website, and there are some alliances. They do have some groups that are specific to senior centers, and there is a national organization of senior centers that might be helpful. Is there anyone on the call from, is it Charleston? Anybody from Charleston? I don't know, but they have a beautiful senior center. Is it called the Lifespan Center? We went down there to visit. I would love to have something like that, and it's fantastic. So they were also very open to us visiting and talking to our executive director. So I'd really recommend that group in Charleston, Illinois, to figure out. It's fairly new, within, I'd say, the last 10 years. The beautiful building, and that's where I would kind of look first. But.
There was more of a comment. So someone mentioned that 880.org, and it's a Canadian organization, and the premise is if we plan and design for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, that will cover all planning and design issues. So more of a comment.
Yeah. Thank you, Patsy. That is, I think, a good resource to look at too.
And Dr. Bartlett, does your work draw from some of the cultural models in other countries where older residents are better integrated into the flow of life?
Oh, that is a great question, because actually we have a lot of research going on here about cross-cultural aging. And Mike, I have to be honest with you, we talk a lot about it, and it's actually one of my most popular, other than this talk, it's the talk that I get requested to give the most, is aging around the world and what that looks like in other communities. So, my background is anthropology, and so we do draw on that, but one of the challenges is really, and this was evident, I think, a couple of years ago. I don't remember if you were, there were a lot of books about, raising children the French way, raising children the Finnish way. Well, there's a similar setup, how are old people treated in Finland? How are older adults treated in Sweden? We should just do that. And one of the big challenges there is that our culture and our infrastructure just aren't set up for it. I mean, I could try and, put my kid in a beret and speak French to them, but at this, I don't have some of their national health care. I don't have their national child care. So there are things like that. We could, introduce the Swedish concept of fika, which is older adults serving coffee in their homes. That would be great, but we can't. It's more of a social club for older adults, but we don't have a lot of, in Sweden, for example, a lot of senior services are carried out at the municipal level and are very well coordinated. And so I think, to answer your question, there is a lot to learn from how other cultures do it, but we have to be very mindful that we can't just borrow their approaches without infrastructure to support some of these things that are going on.
Dr. Bartlett, do you have any examples or suggestions, resources for towns with populations fewer than 5,000?
Yes. So I would look kind of broadly to the state of Maine, and there's a lot on the AARP website, because the state of Maine is one of the oldest states. It's the oldest. They have the most older people. They also have the most older adults living in rural areas. They have the most older adults living in small towns. And really what they've done is come together as counties and come together as a state. And the AARP does have a lot on age-friendly Maine. So I would look to them.
Okay. And Dr. Bartlow, I'm afraid I'm going to have to log off, but I think Nancy's going to continue on. So I'll ask the next question and then ask Nancy to follow up. There was questions about including why aren't elderly being considered, and why do we separate elderly from the rest of the population? Also a comment about thanking you for having a party for those who sometimes don't get a party until their funeral. So a compliment on having the party, but wondering about pulling the elderly out from the rest of the population, I think.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, because that is something that is near and dear to my own professional and personal interest. Is I'm very concerned about generational segregation and people being segregated by age, because I think a lot of really what is at the root of this is ageism. And how can ageism be combated? How can any ism be combated? How can any bigotry be combated? A lot of it has to do with interacting with people of different ages. So that actually speaks to more, I'd say, not a lot of the work that we're doing here at the university. We're trying to, we have several programs that are designed to connect younger people and older people, hosting interns, but we also have several research programs trying to encourage students to go into aging research, and also students from a variety of backgrounds as well, students who might be first-generation college students or racial and ethnic minorities as well. So I think really a lot of it has to do with ageism. It needs to be seen as an issue for everyone, and not just an issue for older people and aging services professionals. But really, we have to kind of critically engage with these conversations with younger people as well. And I see another question about the survey from Patsy. Yes, it is. The answer to that, Patsy, is yes. We will likely do another post-COVID survey, because a lot has changed, but also, and you are correct about random structure to better reach the diversity of the community. We also have also considered some alternate methods of data collection as well, because we know a survey just isn't going to reach everyone. So partnering to do some focus groups with targeted populations. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Wendy. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
All right. So we did have a question in the chat as well on being able to access these slides. And so I just want to also verbally tell everybody that they will receive a copy of the slides for the presentation in a follow-up email today. And so we did have another question that was regarding senior centers, and I wanted to make sure you got that one. I'm not for sure if did you get the one on resources with information regarding starting a senior center in an age-friendly community?
Yeah, and I think there is a national organization of senior centers that I think would be a good place to start. And I think the AARP also has some resources, and I would connect with I think it's called the Lifespan Center in Charleston, because they have a beautiful facility and a wonderful programming, and some I think some exciting opportunities for intergenerational programming. And I'd be
Nice.
happy if anyone wants to email me later to learn more or chat. You can always do that.
Yes, why don't you go ahead and put your email in the chat box so that
Okay.
people have that. We just really thank you so much for being so responsive during the discussion, and then also, putting yourself out there if somebody wants to email you with questions or talk to you, engage you in development questions for their community for this type of initiative.
Yeah, one thing I should also add is that one of the things that we did during the shutdown is that we had our action plan translated into Spanish as well to reach a broader segment of the population, but also to mentor communities worldwide who might like to see an example of an action plan in Spanish as well. So that is available on our website also.
Wonderful. And so that website is chad.illinois.edu, which is on this slide. That's a great resource. Did you see Patsy's comment about 880? And did you want to comment on that?
No, sorry, I didn't.
That's okay. She had mentioned there's a
Oh, yes, 880. Yes.
that this is a
Thank you for
website.
sharing, Patsy. It's a great resource. I'd highly recommend to everyone to check that out as well.
And one of the things I like to ask presenters is to sort of provide an answer to that question that you really have in the back of your mind that you wish people would know to ask, because a lot of the time when people are learning about some sort of new concept or idea, they might not know, they're asking questions, but they might not have, be far down the line and thinking about this to ask other questions that might come up once they get the ball rolling, maybe once they get a steering committee together in their community to start doing that. So what are some of what do you want to sort of give as a takeaway to our audience on that?
Oh gosh, that is a really good question. I would say don't be afraid to be flexible. I think that maybe at the beginning, we were a little, and this is probably just an outcome of COVID, and maybe we would have just marched along. We're kind of very married to that action plan. We were very excited about it. We spent a lot of time on it. So really kind of thinking about, have the needs of your community changed, and what will serve your community best, not your action plan best. And the AARP is also very flexible. They're not going to, kick you out of the network if you don't follow your action plan to a T. So really kind of the flexibility piece. I think one other thing that also comes up a lot is people, a lot of times we get well-meaning questions that are like, well, why old people? Why not children? And we really try to stay away from that. And I really encourage people to think of it as a livable community, as a community that's livable for everyone, not just not one generation or another. So I really dislike anything that, pits. I don't know why it comes up, but it comes up a lot, just by doing something for older people, you're not taking anything away from children, and vice versa, but trying to think about a community in an inclusive manner that includes people of all ages as both residents, but also as resources and people that contribute to their community.
I think that highlights a really interesting idea about services in general, is people in the community are most satisfied when the general community is satisfied as well. It's not like you would just want services to, for example, trash pickup. How would you feel if you were the only one who had trash pickup, but then no one else got it, right? I mean, people generally feel content if others are content. So it's an
Right.
interesting idea to bring up that you're not going to want to focus too much on one group because they're all interconnected.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, thank you so much. If there's any other takeaway that you'd like to give our group, I also want to just tell everybody, we are past the 1 o'clock hour, but if there is another burning question out there, go ahead and put it in the chat box. This is sort of your last chance, though you are strongly encouraged to email if you have another question after the fact, or if you're listening to the recording today and you have a question for Wendy, her email is wbartlo@illinois.edu. And you'll also see that Mike has put a poll up on your screen if you want to click on the appropriate answer, as we want to sort of get an idea of relevancy on this topic for our audience today. Thanks so much for giving us that information.
Well, thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for coming on. This is the second time you've presented on Age Friendly with local government education. And so I assume that we'll have you back on sometime in the future for updates and developments on this topic.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
I would love to.
Right. Well, thank you, everybody. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.